I heard my marriage die in a hotel lobby 1,000 miles away, clean, bloodless, and rehearsed. My name is Grant Holloway. I'm 45, a financial advisor at Betrayal Dynamics in Denver, and the kind of man people hire when they want their numbers to behave. Quiet work. Methodical work. I build portfolios the way other people build cabins, measuring twice, cutting once, weatherproofing every seam. It's the same way I thought I'd built my life with Melanie. She was supposed to be in Miami for a pharmaceutical conference. I was at home, sleeves rolled, reviewing a quarterly rebalancing plan for a client who still mailed handwritten thank you notes. My phone lit up with Melanie's name at 8:13 p.m. The connection clicked and the noise of some hotel atrium pressed against my ear, ice and glasses, the wheeled suitcase of a late arrival, a scatter of laughter that didn't belong to me. "I'm not coming home," she said. Calm. Practiced. Like she'd said the line to a mirror until it didn't scratch her throat. I capped my pen, set it on the blotter, and stared at the curve it made with the paperclip dish. "All right," I said, because what else was there? There's someone else. She let the sentence sit there between us. His name is Russell. Russell Phillips. My regional director. Of course there was a title. There is always a title. I see. He understands me. He sees my potential. She lifted her voice a fraction, the way she did when she needed a doctor to switch formularies. "This has been coming for a while, Grant. We just weren't aligned." The words were smooth river stones. She'd polished them for weeks. I pictured her on the edge of a rented bed, lamp on, hotel stationery dotted with half phrases, arrowed revisions. She was very good at scripts. It's what made her an exceptional pharmaceutical rep at Lenara Ventures. It's also, I realized, what made her a stranger to me now. She cleared her throat and delivered the last line with clean efficiency. "I've already emptied our joint investment account." Talking to my lawyer, he said it was the smart move. There it was. Not the cut, no, I'd been bracing for that one. I'd felt it under my ribs for months. The twist of the blade was the money. She thought she was impressive. She thought she was terrifying. "I understand," I said, and hung up. Then I turned to the second laptop, the one I use only for personal accounts, lifted the lid, and logged in. A transfer request blinked at me from the dashboard, $212,000 out of what she believed was our primary joint portfolio. Status: pending. A red bar beneath it read, "Dual authorization required for transfers above $10,000. 3 months earlier, I'd created that exact condition, had watched our lives like a market about to correct, and did what I always do for clients: set hedges, moved exposure, put the core in a place the storm couldn't touch. The account she'd rated was a decoy: tidy balances, believable positions, just enough to satisfy a quick glance. Our real assets, the ones built over 12 years of careful saving and boring weekends, sat in an irrevocable trust with my signature and a lock she didn't know existed. I could have denied the transfer right then. I could have approved it and let her have her illusion. Instead, I watched the word pending blink and felt the peculiar calm that comes when your contingency plan hums like a perfectly tuned engine. People imagine the end of a marriage as shouting and thrown plates. Sometimes it is. Mine ended like a spreadsheet column turning from black to red, and me already holding the fix in cell H48. Here is the part one should admit. I saw it coming. Not on the first late night, not on the first business trip that didn't appear on Lenara's calendar, not even on the first 11:37 p.m. call from R. Phillips that she waved away as a regional oversight thing. I am a numbers man, which means pattern is what I understand first and pride is what I understand last. By the time pride stirred itself, the pattern was a neon sign. 2 years ago, the distance began with small rationings. She started putting the phone face down at dinner. She started angling herself away from me in photos. She started using a variable rate of affection, warm if she needed my scheduling flexibility, cool if she was on a streak at work. The intimacy in our calendar changed from a living rhythm to a placeholder we both kept forgetting to reschedule. The children we once attempted to have never came. The specialist's phrases low count, unlikely without intervention, hung in our bedroom like a second set of curtains. She cried the night we understood that wishing would not bend biology. I told her we'd look at other paths, but work metastasized for both of us and grief slotted itself into the same place we put our winter coats, out of sight, never quite out of mind. We got used to the quiet. We told ourselves we liked it. The new regional director arrived at Lenara 18 months ago, a tidy man with better suits than sense. Melanie volunteered for everything that might flow across his desk. He sees what I bring to the table, Grant, she said, and I believed her because she did bring something. Stamina, a gold-plated smile, the ability to make a reluctant physician feel as if changing a prescription might cure loneliness. Patterns broke and reformed. Expenses started appearing in clusters on nights she was supposedly out of town but charged to bistros that existed halfway between our house and Russell's condo. Hotel confirmations pinged her personal email. Once, she left her laptop open on the counter, and I saw a calendar entry titled Miami Hymn. She never labeled anything carelessly. That carelessness was its own signal. I did not yell. I did not place a fist on a table and demand the truth. I did what I have always done. I prepared. I established a small, believable joint account. I created an irrevocable trust into which everything else moved with the boring grace of paperwork. I added dual authorization to any transfer above the price of a cheap used car. I ensured the home we lived in could only be liquidated by a trustee whose signature was not hers. She signed the restructuring documents without reading them twice because she was texting someone about an early flight and because trust can be a habit as dangerous as any addiction. By the time she called me from Miami, the fuse had already burned to the charge, and I was standing a safe distance away. The morning after her call, my phone sang itself hoarse on the counter with urgent texts. I brewed coffee, answered client emails as if nothing were happening, and walked through our house that still smelled faintly of her dry shampoo and the citrus cleaner she liked for the stainless steel. In the foyer, 2 suitcases leaned against the wall. The big one was mine, scuffed at the corners from an old trip to an old beach. The small one was hers, a roller bag the exact color of ambition. At 9:41, the doorbell rang. Vanessa stood there, Melanie's closest friend at Lenora, the one who always called me stable, like it was an insult and a compliment. "Can I come in?" she asked, though she'd already crossed the threshold with her eyes. I led her to the kitchen. She didn't touch the coffee. She asked me to pick up some things, Vanessa said, knuckles white around her tote handles. Jewelry. A few clothes. She still has a key, I said. She could have done it herself. She thought. Vanessa stopped, stared at the floor, went with a different sentence. She wanted me to check if the transfer went through. Of course she did. I turned the laptop toward her. Pending, I said. And it'll stay that way. She's not going to be happy, Vanessa whispered. I'm aware. Vanessa's eyes, which were very good at tracking upward mobility, softened for a second. You didn't deserve this, Grant. I wasn't sure if that's true. Deserve is a slippery instrument, fit for sermons, useless for balance sheets. Take what she asked for, I said. The safe code hasn't changed. She left with a suitcase of dresses that cost more than our mortgage once did, and a jewelry box full of apologies I'd paid for. By lunch, my inbox held 3 emails from Melanie, one from a lawyer named Hayes, and a calendar invite from my own attorney, Thomas Wilson. Thomas had been my client for a decade before he became my friend. He read the situation like a prospectus and scheduled me for 4 p.m., the way you schedule a necessary injection. Thomas's office looks out at a mountain line that has kept its own counsel for 1,000,000 years. He slid his glasses down his nose the way he does when he's aligning anger with law. Walk me through it. I did. The call, the transfer, the decoy, the trust, the patterns, the emails and hotel bookings I'd cataloged without commentary. Thomas takes notes with a brass fountain pen a judge once gave him as a thank you. He filled 2 pages, then leaned back and steepled his fingers. You're in a strong position, he said. Colorado's no fault, but courts still notice behavior. The attempted asset drain looks bad. It looks like strategy, I said. It looks like greed, he countered, which is the same thing in a courtroom if you're not the one with the brass pen. We filed that afternoon. Petition for dissolution, request for a temporary restraining order preventing her from entering the home, motion to freeze the joint decoy account until a court could sift the gravel from the gold. Thomas sent a letter to Melanie's attorney, all communications to pass through him. I forwarded screenshots. I slept. 3 days passed. I cooked eggs for one. I answered market questions with the ease of a man who had controlled all the variables that could be controlled and named the rest force majeure with a clear conscience. On the 4th day, Melanie let herself into the house using the key I had forgotten to ask for early. She looked expensive. She also looked harried, the first hairline crack in the asset called Russell. "What did you do?" she demanded, brandishing her phone like a warrant. "I protected our assets," I said, and only after the sentence was out did I realize I still used the word "are." "You can't block me from what's mine. The court will decide what's yours," I replied. "In the meantime, I've blocked you from what you tried to take." Her fury collapsed into strategy so smoothly I almost admired it. Her shoulders loosened, her mouth softened, her eyes found mine as if this were a good-faith negotiation instead of a salvage operation. "I was emotional," she said. "I didn't mean to end things like that, Grant. We should talk. Just us." "We will," I said. "Via counsel." "Counsel," she repeated, the syllables sour. "You already retained someone?" "Yesterday." I waited. It took her 5 seconds to understand I wasn't bluffing, and another 5 to decide whether the next chapter of her performance was rage or tears. She chose the easier one. "Russell was right about you," she hissed. "No ambition. No backbone." I looked at the picture frame on the mantel in Aspen, before separate vacations became default. She had insisted on the hardwood floors. The frame broke beautifully when she whipped it across the room. I watched the glass fan out and thought, the mess still has to be swept all the same, whether you throw the thing or set it down. "I'll need your key," I said. She slapped it on the table and left without looking back. After I cleaned the glass, I poured 2 fingers of bourbon and called Thomas. "She came by," I said. "Expect noise." He chuckled. "Noise is fine. Paper is better." Paper came the next morning. A letter embossed with an expensive downtown letterhead demanded I release all joint assets immediately, vacate our home for her use until the equitable division of property could be determined, and commit to an appropriate level of rehabilitative alimony. It read like a ransom note that had hired a stylist. 2 hours later, Thomas filed an amended petition and a response so clean it should have been framed. He attached the attempted transfer, the hotel confirmations, the text logs that paired perfectly with Russell's travel schedule. He added a request for exclusive use and possession of the home pending the hearing. He copied their office manager because sometimes small humiliations are the only ones that teach anything. That afternoon, a new message landed in my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was a time and a cafe. Normally, I do not meet ghosts. This one I did. She was already seated when I arrived at Fair and Finch on Colfax, that corner, seat facing the door. Mid-40s, excellent suit, the posture of someone who had spent a long time in rooms where you only speak once you've counted the knives. She did not offer a hand. "Grant Holloway?" she asked. "Yes, I'm Jessica Harlow," she said, HR director at Lenara. We had shaken hands at charity events. We had never had a conversation without a cheese tray between us. She slid a thumb drive across the table. "I wasn't here," she said. "What is this?" 14 months of emails between your wife and Russell." Her voice held no tremor. Also, calendar entries, after-hours access logs, and a list of files she pulled without authorization. "I didn't touch the drive." "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because Russell has done this before, 3 times I can prove, 5 I suspect. He targets married women who report to him. He promises promotions, lures them over a line they don't realize is criminal, and then leaves them holding the bag when compliance notices. Also," she added, because this time it wasn't just bad morals. It was federal crime. He's been selling pre-publication research summaries to a competitor. We're cooperating with an ongoing FBI investigation. My mouth went dry in a way bourbon had not managed. Is Melanie complicit? Manipulated? We'll let someone in a blue jacket decide the word, Jessica said. But she accessed restricted files, forwarded them to his personal email, and lied about it on a compliance questionnaire. She's not built for prison, I heard myself say. Jessica snorted. Very few are. Use that to protect yourself. I need to get back before anyone notices I took a late lunch. You weren't here, I repeated. Correct, she said, stood, and left without looking back. I waited 2 minutes, then palmed the drive and carried it to my car like it might detonate. That night, I read everything, the banal emails about flights and dinners, the not banal ones about extracting what we can from the accounts, and the frankly terrifying one where Russell wrote, "Once you're free from the accountant, Miami is yours. Get what you can now. We won't need him once you've emptied the vault." Melanie had replied, "He's smarter than you think. He'll notice." Russell's answer was a single line, then move faster. I printed 3 pages and slid the rest into a folder. I slept like my spine was replaced with steel wire. The next morning, Thomas read the emails, nodded once, and smiled without humor. You don't need revenge, Grant. You need leverage. This is leverage. We sent a settlement proposal that afternoon. Melanie would accept a one-time payment of $50,000. She would disclaim any interest in the trust, the house, and my retirement accounts. There would be no alimony. Both parties would sign ironclad non-disclosure agreements regarding each other's private matters, and this packet of emails would remain a private curiosity rather than a public parade. Her lawyer's reply arrived in 39 minutes. We need to meet. We met in Thomas's conference room, the one with the long walnut table and the view that made every victory feel like a small prayer. Melanie entered with her attorney, Carlton Hayes, a silver-haired man whose tie cost more than my first car. She looked wrecked and radiant at the same time. Some people have that gift, burning prettily while the house collapses. Hayes opened with the word reasonable and pronounced it in a way that meant capitulate. Thomas slid the proposal across. Hayes scanned, raised his eyebrows at the number, and delivered his line. This is unserious. This is mercy, Thomas said. Hayes started to reply. Thomas placed 3 printed emails on the walnut with the quiet weight of a gavel. Hayes read. The blood left his face so fast I heard it go. He leaned toward Melanie and muttered. She shook her head once, then again, fast, like a bird refusing a hand. This is blackmail, she said, but the word came out thin. This is me protecting myself from the consequences of your choices, I said. I watched her eyes harden when I refused to use we for the first time. Hayes asked for 10 minutes. Thomas gave him 20. They returned at 19 and a half. Hayes folded his hands like he was praying. We can accept your terms with one addition, he said. Formal assurance that these materials will not be forwarded to Lenara or to any law enforcement agency. Thomas looked at me. He had already written the clause. Agreed, I said, on the condition that the agreement is signed today and no further motions are filed. Melanie didn't look at me while she signed. When the last page lay cooling on the walnut, she stood, gathered herself into what was left of grace, and asked, Was any of it real for you? All of it, I said, because truth is a kind of luxury I could afford, which is precisely why this is over. She left with her lawyer. Thomas poured me coffee that had turned to tar and said, 90 days and a judge will bless this paper. What about Russell? I asked. Not our problem, he said, then tilted his head. Unless you want it to be. I stared at the emails. The NDAs we'd sign would bind me from sending anything to Lunara or law enforcement. They said nothing about a brown envelope without a return address, mailed by a human being who had no name. That man has a career made of other people's ruins, I said. Thomas didn't nod. He didn't need to. 3 weeks later, a quiet item in the business section of the Denver Post announced that pharmaceutical executive Russell Phillips has resigned amid an internal compliance review. No one quoted Russell. No one quoted Melanie. A smaller piece the following Wednesday noted that the FBI had opened a formal inquiry into unlawful dissemination of proprietary research data. The article did not mention arrests. It did not need to. Melanie texted me a single sentence that night. I know that was you. I did not tell her she was half right. I did not reply. The house sold in June. The proceeds, by prior paperwork, walked themselves into the trust and closed the gate. I moved to a smaller place west of downtown with a deck that faced a thin slice of mountains. The quiet there didn't feel like absence. It felt like an instrument finally tuned. Lenora called me in August. Not legal compliance. We need help rebuilding our internal controls, said the voice on the phone. Jessica recommended you. The offer started as a consultancy and turned into a division a year later, head of financial compliance, oversight of anti-fraud controls, a team of analysts who still thought ethics was a word you whispered in church. We built something from the ashes of another something, which is one of the only alchemies worth practicing. Vanessa emailed me a month after the settlement. She's in Phoenix now, she wrote, teaching part-time at a community college. He's nowhere. Last I heard, Miami chewed him up. She told me to tell you she's sorry. I told her I'm not your postal service. I replied with a thank you and nothing else. Vanessa sent back a heart, then a shrug emoji, modern hieroglyphs for we lived through something complicated. On a Tuesday in September, I had coffee with a woman named Catherine from Lunara's legal department. We talked Sarbanes-Oxley and hiking trails, and she laughed when I told her the proof of a good audit is silence. It felt like a conversation two adults have when they are not trying to resuscitate a myth. I never forwarded the rest of the emails. The NDAs sat in a drawer. The trust threw off its quiet dividends. Twice a year, those dividends walked into a scholarship fund for students studying financial ethics at the community college in Phoenix because transforming harm into instruction is also a hedge. People imagine revenge as a dramatic art, shouted confessions, splashed wine, a car door slammed so hard a neighbor peeks through the blinds. My version wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. I let paper do the lifting. I let numbers do their old, holy work, balancing. But there are scenes I still replay, not out of bitterness, but because they feel like the hinge points in a life. There was the day after the settlement when I packed the last of my clothes into boxes labeled with the masculine handwriting I inherited from my father. I found a wedding photo at the back of a drawer, me in a rented tux, Melanie in a dress that borrowed light from everywhere. I held it long enough to feel something like tenderness, then slid it into the box marked Old Lives and taped the top shut. There was the first quiet Saturday morning in the new place when I brewed coffee strong enough to make my hands honest and stepped onto the deck. The city hummed below. The mountains did what they always do, remained. Some things stay, I said aloud, a sentence addressed to no one and to everything. There was a lunch months later with Jessica, her laugh loud for a woman who had learned to count knives. You know, she said, most men in your position would have burned the world down. I moved assets, I said, not false and not humble. You changed a department, she said, which was also true. We would have caught him eventually, but you made it faster, more precise. Precision is what I do, I said. Precision is a kindness, she replied, and I wrote that down on a napkin because I am the kind of man who writes good sentences down. There was the text from an old mutual friend saw Melanie at the grocery store. She looked softer. Less sharp around the edges. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't need a report. If she had found a life that fit her instead of a love that dazzled her, that was its own kind of math. There was the day our division at Lenora rolled out the new compliance portal with two-factor everything and quarterly training that was actually interesting. We built a small online module called The Temptation Curve that explained how a series of tiny rationalizations do not sum to a noble thing. The module used anonymized examples. The interns still called it the Russell. I didn't correct them. There was a night in winter when Catherine and I ate pho at a place that writes the bill by hand. She told me about a case she lost early in her career and how it taught her that the law is a machine built by humans and therefore not holy. Good people still fall in, she said. Our job is to build more guardrails. Or to put our assets where the flood can't reach, I said. Or that, she smiled and took my hand across the table in a way that felt like something I could believe in. We took it slow. We took it honest. I learned that slowness and honesty are the only medicines that ever last. If you need a scene with fireworks, here's the closest I have. A year and a day after the call from Miami, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a courier with a small box and a signature tablet. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, lay the frame from the Aspen photo repaired. The note on top read, in a handwriting I knew like my own name, I replaced the glass. Keep or toss. Either way, thank you for not destroying me when you could have. M. I held the frame. The new glass was thicker than the old. The photo under it was in the past tense. I set it on the workbench in the garage next to a bin labeled scrap wood. It lived there for a month while I decided which life I was building. One Saturday, I took the frame apart, slid the photo into a folder of paper artifacts that explained me to no one, and used the wooden frame to add a rail to the workbench. It holds my chisels now. Every time my hand reaches for one, the wood that once held a picture steadies the blade. This is not metaphor, it's joinery. The story people ask for is simple. She left. She tried to take the money. You outplayed her. You won. But that's not the story that sits with me. The story that sits with me is of a younger man in a rented tux telling a younger woman that they would build something that lasted. We did for a while. We made a house out of calendars and dinners and the wobbling faith that tomorrow would look enough like today when we wanted it to and nothing like today when we didn't. Faith is a risky asset class. I probably overweighted it. When the market turned, I did what I was good at. I hedged. I placed the essentials where the storm couldn't get them. I left the rest to weather. Sometimes justice looks like a gavel. Sometimes it looks like a spreadsheet that finally balances. Sometimes it looks like two people who do not speak learning how to not hate the way another person's breath once sounded in the night. If you want to know whether I forgave her, the answer is yes and no. I forgave the woman who was 29 and believed that ambition was a ladder you climbed by any grip available. I did not forgive the woman who sat in a hotel lobby and recited a script while thinking she had outsmarted the quiet man at the other end of the line. I forgave myself for missing the signs, which was the hardest thing to do. I have learned this. The part of you that needs to be right is the part most likely to wreck a life given enough rope. It would be a shame to hand it more. These days, when the market lunges, my clients call me and I say what I always say, volatility is not catastrophe, it's a reminder to test what you built. Some nights I sit on a deck that smells like wet pine after a storm and think about the sentence my father used to write in the margins of any instruction manual he brought to the garage. If you take care of the tool takes care of you. I took care of my tools. In the end, they took care of me. The rest, love, trust, regret, those are instruments without warranties. Handle them often, sharpen them when you can, oil the hinges. Do not pretend you can keep them from rust. Accept that you can always build again and that the second structure, made with steadier hands, rarely creaks when the wind rises. On the anniversary, I didn't celebrate. I woke before dawn. I brewed coffee and stirred it with the same spoon I used the night before the call. The spoon will outlast us all. I stepped onto the deck and watched the city begin its morning inventory, trash trucks, runners, the red thread of taillights on 6th Avenue, a plane angling toward a farther life. The mountains did not care who had left whom. That, too, felt like a kind of mercy. I went inside, tied my shoes, and drove to a trailhead that used to be ours. I walked until the sunlight cleared the ridgeline and laid itself across the rocks. I pressed my palm to a patch of granite warmed by a star 93 million miles away and laughed once, quietly, because I am a man who deserves at least one cliché earned the honest way. On the way home, my phone buzzed. A notification from the scholarship fund. 2 more students approved, tuition covered, books paid for, exam fees handled. One of them had written a note, "Thank you for believing that ethics is a job you can learn to do. I plan to prove you right." So do I, kid, I thought, and turned left toward the city that holds both the worst thing that happened to me and the best thing I built afterward. I did not answer when an unknown number called 10 minutes later. Maybe it was a salesperson. Maybe it was a ghost. The voicemail transcribed itself on my screen. "Hi, Grant. It's been a while." I just wanted to say I swiped it away, not out of cruelty, but because some stories do not need sequels. The first act lasted 12 years, the second act began with a word on a banking portal, and the third act looks like this: a stack of case files on my desk, a team who thinks the boring miracle of doing things right is a revolution, a woman who asks me how the hike was and means it, and a ledger that balances without tricks. People want to know how it felt the moment I realized the transfer request would never clear without my approval. It felt like this: the gentle click of a deadbolt when you turn the key, the sound of your own breath, and the knowledge that the house you're in, however modest, has walls that will hold.